My name is Tessa Lindgren. The first time someone called me a criminal, I was standing in a hardware store in Millbrook, Minnesota, being told I didn't get the job. The manager wouldn't look me in the eye. He said they'd received a phone call. Someone had warned him about me. Theft, fraud, a history of violence. I've never stolen anything in my life, but someone had phoned ahead. Someone who knew exactly where I'd applied. Someone who lied. For 2.5 years, my parents phoned every employer I applied to and told them I had a criminal record. By 25, I was homeless. By 26, I was surviving in a shelter 60 miles from the town that raised me, living on food bank donations and borrowed dignity. My mother sent cards through the shelter mail. "We miss you, sweetheart. Just come home and say you're sorry." Then one February morning, a stranger sat down on the edge of my bed. She was holding a leather satchel with initials I recognized, HL, and she said 7 words that changed everything. Your great aunt saw this coming. Before I tell you what Helena left me, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if stories like this truly resonate with you. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Helena died 14 months ago. She never told anyone what she'd been doing, but she'd been watching my father for over a decade, and she left me everything I needed to destroy him. That morning, I sat on my shelter bed, bed number 7, thin mattress, wool blanket that smelled like industrial detergent, and stared at the satchel like it might catch fire. The woman's name was Diane Hartley, private investigator, licensed in Minnesota. She handed me a business card, but I barely looked at it. I couldn't stop staring at those initials, HL. Helena Lindgren. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Your great aunt gave me specific instructions. She said when things got bad enough, and she was very specific about what bad enough meant, I was to locate you and deliver this." Bad enough? Diane looked at me with steady eyes. "When your mother called the shelter last month and claimed you had a history of violence, that triggered the final condition." My stomach dropped. I hadn't known about that call. The shelter director had mentioned something about a strange inquiry, but she'd brushed it off. She'd protected me without telling me why. I looked at the satchel again. What's in it? Diane stood up. "Everything. But before you open it, you should know, your great aunt spent 8 years preparing this. She wanted you to understand what you're holding. It's not just evidence. It's a way out." She handed me a sealed envelope from her jacket pocket. "Read this first. Her instructions." Then she walked out of the shelter, and I was alone with a dead woman's satchel and a lifetime of questions. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard. Instead, I sat there thinking about how I ended up in this bed, in this shelter, in this version of my life that felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. And I thought about Crestwood, Minnesota. Population 6,200. The town where everyone knew your name and nobody knew the truth. The place I used to call home. Crestwood sits 40 minutes west of Duluth, surrounded by pine trees and frozen lakes, and the kind of silence that makes people either peaceful or crazy. I'm still not sure which one it made me. The Lindgrens were pillars. That's what people said. My father, Warren, worked as the town clerk for 18 years. He knew every permit, every ordinance, every backdoor way to get things done. My mother, Judith, ran the women's ministry at Grace Lutheran Church. She organized the food drives, the Christmas pageants, the prayer circles. She had a soft voice and a softer smile and a way of making people feel like they were the only person in the room. Behind our front door, the rules were different. I wasn't allowed to have a cell phone until I was 19. I wasn't allowed to drive alone until I was 20. Every paycheck from my part-time job at the Crestwood grocery went into a joint account my mother had set up for safekeeping. I never saw a statement. When I graduated high school, salutatorian, 2 points behind Kristen Mueller, my guidance counselor pulled me aside. Tessa, you could get scholarships, real ones. Have you thought about leaving Crestwood? I brought the brochures home. My father didn't open them. He set them on the counter and said, "College is for people who don't have family to take care of." So I stayed. I cleaned, I cooked, I mowed the lawn in summer and shoveled the driveway in winter. I sat at dinner every night and listened to my father talk about how the world was falling apart and how lucky I was to have a roof and a family and people who loved me. "What else does a girl your age need?" he'd ask. I never had an answer. The week after I turned 24, something cracked inside me. I was standing at the kitchen sink, scrubbing the same cast iron pan I'd been scrubbing since I was 14, and a thought hit me like a fist. I'm going to be 40 years old, standing in this exact spot, doing this exact thing. The next morning, I walked to the Crestwood Public Library. I sat down at a computer in the back row, the one with the sticky keyboard and the 15-minute time limit, and I created a new email address. Not the family one my mother monitored. A new one. Mine. I found a listing for a hardware store in Millbrook, 30 minutes east. They needed a sales associate, full-time, benefits after 90 days. I typed my application with 2 fingers and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. 2 days later, they called me in for an interview. I drove to Millbrook on a Thursday morning. The manager's name was Glenn. He shook my hand at the door. He smiled. Then he sat me down, and his smile disappeared. "Tessa, I have to ask you something. Is there anything in your background we should know about?" I blinked. "No, sir. Nothing." He took off his glasses. "We received a phone call yesterday. Someone mentioned a theft charge." The room tilted. "That's not true. I've never been arrested. I've never stolen anything." Glenn looked at me. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to believe me, but he also had a business to run. "I'm sorry, we can't move forward." I drove home in silence. No radio, no tears, just the white lines on the highway blurring past. When I pulled into the driveway, my father was sitting on the porch, newspaper open across his lap. He didn't look up. "How was your day, sweetheart?" I stood there, keys in my hand, staring at the back of his newspaper. He turned a page. Slow. Casual. "Fine," I said. "Good." He folded the paper. "Your mom made hot dish." I sat through dinner. Hot dish, green beans, iced tea, and somewhere between the first bite and the last, a thought started forming. Small. Ugly. Impossible. Did they know? I pushed the thought down. Parents don't do that. Not to their own child. But the thought wouldn't stay buried. Over the next 2 months, I applied to 4 more jobs. A grocery store in Pine Ridge, a warehouse outside Carlton, a diner in Hermantown that was hiring morning shift, a gas station near the highway that needed a cashier. All 4 called me in for interviews. All 4 canceled within 48 hours. The grocery store said they'd filled the position. The warehouse never called back. The gas station manager stopped returning my emails. But the diner was different. The owner, a woman named Bev, was honest with me. She leaned across the counter and lowered her voice. "Honey, someone called here about you." My chest tightened. "What did they say?" "Said you had a criminal record, theft and fraud." Bev paused. "Was it a woman?" I couldn't breathe. "What did she sound like?" "Polite, concerned, said she was a worried neighbor." Worried neighbor. That night, I waited until my parents went to bed. I crept down the hallway to my father's home office, the one room in the house that was his alone. The door was never locked. He didn't think he needed to lock it. He didn't think I'd ever look. I turned on his computer. The password was my mother's birthday. I'd seen him type it 100 times. The desktop was cluttered with files. tax documents, church bulletins, town council agendas, and one folder labeled Tessa Applications. I opened it. Inside were screenshots of my email inbox. They'd been monitoring my account, the old one, the family one, but also the new one. I didn't know how. Maybe they'd installed something on my phone? Maybe they'd guessed the password. Below the screenshots were notes, my father's handwriting scanned in. Millbrook Hardware, called 314, spoke with manager, mentioned theft. Pine Ridge Market, called 322, left message about fraud charges. Hermantown Family Diner, Judith called 41, said she was a concerned neighbor. Every single place I'd applied, documented, checked off. I stood in that dark office, the glow of the monitor burning my eyes, and the floor dropped out from under me. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. My parents had a system. They were tracking me. They were hunting me. I closed the folder. I turned off the computer. I walked to my room. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I printed the folder. I walked into the kitchen and placed the pages on the table. My mother was pouring coffee. My father was buttering toast. The radio was playing the local news. Everything normal, everything ordinary. Explain this. My mother looked at the papers. Her hand froze mid-pour. Coffee pooled on the counter. Then the tears came. You went through your father's things? Her voice cracked. Is this how I raised you? Snooping through private documents? You called my employers, every one of them. You told them I'm a criminal. I did it because I love you. She pressed her hand to her chest. The world out there is dangerous. You have no idea what can happen to a young woman alone. I'm 24 years old. I'm not a child. My father set his toast down. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. We're protecting you, Tessa. You think you can survive out there? You can't even balance a checkbook. I've never seen my own checkbook. You've kept it from me my whole life. He ignored that. Drop this right now. I'm going to the police. Warren laughed. One short breath through his nose. And tell them what? That your mother made some phone calls? They'll laugh you out of the station. I looked at my mother, tears streaming, coffee still pooling. I looked at my father, calm as Sunday morning, buttering another piece of toast. If you don't stop, I said, I'm leaving. He didn't blink. You walk out that door, you walk out with nothing. No money, no documents, nothing. I thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. I packed that night. 1 backpack, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my phone charger, and a photograph of my great-aunt Helena that I kept in my nightstand drawer, the only picture I had where she was smiling. When I opened the front door, my mother was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, face dry. The tears from that morning were gone, replaced by something harder. If you leave, she said, you're dead to us. My father stood behind her, arms folded, filling the hallway like a wall. I stepped onto the porch, pulled out my phone, opened the banking app. Balance, $0 and 0 cents. Years of paychecks, tip money from bagging groceries, birthday cash from Helena, every dollar I'd ever earned. Gone. My mother had been on that account since I was 16. She didn't need my permission. I need my birth certificate, I said, and my social security card. Those belong to this house, my father said from behind the screen door. Then he closed it. I walked down the driveway at 9:32 p.m. on a Wednesday in November. I had a backpack, a phone with 14% battery, and $11 in my pocket. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anywhere to go. I walked to the gas station on Route 7 and sat on the curb under the fluorescent lights. A truck pulled in and out. The cashier looked at me once through the window, then looked away. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my father. "Getting cold out there. Doors still open. For now." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Have your parents destroyed an opportunity for you and then acted like they were doing you a favor? If that hits close to home, I'd really love to hear your story in the comments. The texts came every Sunday. Same time, same tone. Always from my father's number, but I knew my mother was reading over his shoulder. "Thanksgiving's coming. Your mom's making wild rice hot dish. Saw your friend Megan at the grocery store. She asked about you. Pastor Holmgren mentioned you in the prayer circle. Everyone misses you." Each one a hook. Each one designed to make me feel like I was the problem, like I was the one who'd left, like I was the one who needed to crawl back. I saved every text. I didn't know why yet. Something in me said, keep everything. It was the smartest thing I did that year. Month 4. I was starting to find my footing. My replacement birth certificate had finally arrived. The DMV processed my temporary ID. I had a photo of my own face on a government-issued card for the first time in my adult life. Small victory. Enormous feeling. Then Gloria called me into her office. She was sitting behind her desk. The door was closed. That never happened. Gloria's door was always propped open with a painted rock from the community garden. "Sit down," she said. Not unkind, but serious. "I got a call today. A woman identifying herself as a social worker. She said you have a documented history of violence and that you pose a risk to other residents." The room went cold. That was my mother. Gloria nodded slowly. "I figured. I've worked here 9 years. Social workers don't cold call shelters to trash a resident. That's not how the system works." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I couldn't discuss resident information." She hung up. Gloria leaned forward. "I'm documenting this call in our records, but I have to be honest with you. If she contacts the county office, if she files a formal complaint through the system, I may not be able to protect your spot here. That's above me." I sat there. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The baseboard heater clicked. My parents had sabotaged my job applications. They'd fabricated police reports. They'd drained my bank account. They'd kept my identity documents. And now they were trying to take away the last place I could sleep at night. Something shifted in that moment. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot and sloppy and burns out fast. This was different. This was clear. Like a window someone had been smearing with grease for years, and I'd finally wiped it clean. I was done being scared. I was ready to be precise. But I didn't know how. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have evidence I could prove. I had screenshots from a folder I'd printed months ago, but those were back in Crestwood, probably burned by now. I had nothing but texts from my father and a gut feeling that nobody would believe. Then Gloria said something that made me remember. "A woman came by the shelter a few weeks ago, asking about you." I froze. "What woman?" "Older. Short gray hair, professional. She left a business card, said if you ever wanted to talk, you should call her." Gloria pulled the card from her desk drawer, slightly bent at the corner. "Diane Hartley, licensed private investigator, state of Minnesota." My first thought, my father hired someone to find me. This was his next move. Track me down, report my location, maybe try to get me removed on some fabricated claim. But Gloria shook her head. "She didn't seem like trouble, Tessa. She seemed like someone looking for a person she cared about." I slipped the card into my pocket. I didn't call the number. Not yet. I wasn't ready to walk into whatever trap might be waiting. But the card stayed in my pocket. Every time I did laundry, I moved it to the clean jeans. I couldn't throw it away. "Let me ask you something. If the people who raised you were actively trying to make you homeless, what would you do? I called the number on a Tuesday morning. Diane answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, professional, not surprised to hear from me. "Tessa Lindgren," she said. "I was hoping you'd call." "Who are you?" "My name is Diane Hartley. I'm a licensed private investigator. Your great-aunt Helena hired me 8 years ago." 8 years? She's been dead for over a year. I know, but her instructions were specific. She paid me a retainer up front. She told me to watch, document, and wait. She said when things got bad enough, I'd know, and I'd find you. Bad enough? When your mother called the shelter, pretending to be a social worker, that triggered the final condition. My chest tightened. How did you know about that call? Because I've been monitoring your parents' communications for 2 years. Your great-aunt gave me legal authorization before she passed. She saw this coming, Tessa, almost to the year. I sat down on my shelter bed. The mattress sagged beneath me. Why would she do that? Diane paused. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Because she lived it. She spent 26 years married to a man who controlled everything she did. Your grandfather. By the time she got free, she was 62 years old with nothing but a farmhouse and a plan. She told me once that she couldn't save herself in time, but she could save you. I couldn't speak. I have something for you. Can I come to the shelter? She arrived the next morning. February. Cold enough that my breath frosted the window as I watched her walk across the parking lot. She was carrying the leather satchel. HL stamped on the front in faded gold. Helena Lindgren. Diane sat on the edge of my bed. The shelter was quiet. Everyone else was at the day center or out looking for work. She set the satchel on the mattress between us. "Before you open it," she said, "I think you should understand what's inside. This isn't just evidence. This is 8 years of work. Your great-aunt planned this the way some people plan a retirement. Every detail, every contingency." She handed me a sealed envelope, cream-colored, my name in Helena's handwriting. I opened it. "Tessa, if you're reading this, things have gotten bad. I'm sorry I couldn't stop your father while I was alive. I tried, in my own small ways, but Warren learned from his father and his father learned from his. The Lindgren men have been building cages for generations. I spent my whole marriage inside one. I won't let you spend yours. Inside this satchel is your way out. Use it wisely. Don't use it for revenge. Use it for freedom. I love you more than I ever got to show. Aunt Helena." I set the letter down. My hands were steady. My eyes were not. Diane opened the satchel. Inside was a thick manila folder, tabbed and organized by date. 41 documented phone calls, your mother identifying herself as a concerned neighbor, a former employer, and in 3 instances, a county social worker. Each recording has a timestamp and transcription. She pulled out another folder. Copies of emails sent from an anonymous account traced to your parents' home IP address, attachments mimicking police reports. I have screenshots, metadata, and chain of custody documentation. She pulled out a third folder. Photographs of notes in your father's handwriting taken through his office window during surveillance visits, lists of your job applications, dates, outcomes. I stared at the pile of evidence. 8 years of planning, 14 months of waiting. Is this admissible in court? Every bit of it. Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recordings, and I was hired as a licensed private investigator. My documentation follows chain of custody. I closed the folder, opened it again, closed it. "There's one more thing," Diane said. At the bottom of the satchel was a large envelope. Legal documents, paper-clipped and tabbed. "Your great-aunt sold her farmhouse 9 years ago. She placed the money in a trust. You're the sole beneficiary. Your father has no knowledge of its existence." I looked at the number on the summary page. Then I looked again. $287,000. "She wanted you to be free," Diane said quietly, "and she wanted to make sure you had the means to fight back." If you've stayed with this channel, you already understand something important. Hidden truths don't stay buried when someone loves you enough to document them. I held the folder against my chest. 8 years. She'd been planning my escape for 8 years, and I was finally ready to use it. The trust included one more thing: a name. At the bottom of Helena's letter, written in smaller handwriting like an afterthought, were 2 sentences. "If you need a lawyer, call Margaret Solberg in Duluth. I already told her about you." Margaret Solberg. Civil litigation. Defamation and harassment. I called her that afternoon. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Tessa Lindgren," she said. "Helena told me you might call someday. I was hoping she was wrong." "She wasn't." "I know. I've already spoken with Diane Hartley. I've seen the evidence package." Pause. "Can you come to my office tomorrow?" I took the bus to Duluth the next morning. Margaret's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building downtown. Clean desk, law books on the shelves, a window overlooking the harbor. She was in her early 60s, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "The recordings, the emails, the metadata, the photographs of your father's notes." She set a folder on the desk between us. "This is defamation per se. In Minnesota, falsely stating someone has a criminal record is actionable without proving damages. But we have damages. 2.5 years of them." "What does that mean?" "It means we file a lawsuit. Civil court. Defamation, tortious interference with employment, intentional infliction of emotional distress." She leaned back in her chair. "Your parents will be served publicly. Court records in Minnesota are public. Everyone in Crestwood will be able to read exactly what they did." I sat with that for a moment. "How long will it take?" "Months, maybe a year. But the filing itself will change everything. Once it's on record, your parents can't control the story anymore." I signed the retainer agreement that afternoon. Margaret prepared the lawsuit that week. But before the papers could be filed, my father made his move. Crestwood holds a town council meeting every first Monday of the month. Folding chairs in the community center, a microphone that squeaks if you stand too close. Usually 15 or 20 people show up. Retirees, concerned citizens, the same man who's been complaining about the stoplight on Oak Street for 6 years. Gloria told me about it. Word travels fast in small towns. "Your father signed up to speak tonight," she said. I went. I sat in the last row, near the exit, wearing a borrowed coat. I hadn't been in a public space in Crestwood since I left. My hands were shaking, but I kept them folded in my lap. Warren took the podium at 17:18 p.m. He was wearing his good shirt, the gray one Judith ironed for church and funerals. His voice cracked on the first sentence, and I knew it was rehearsed. "I'm here as a father," he said. "My daughter left home and fell into bad company. She's living in a shelter somewhere. I've tried to bring her home, but she refuses." He paused. Let the silence work. A woman in the second row put her heart on her heart. I'm asking this community to help me reach my little girl. If anyone sees her, please tell her we love her. Tell her the door is always open. In the front row, Judith sat with her hands folded in her lap, tears streaming down her face. The woman beside her, Mrs. Aldridge from the church, reached over and squeezed her arm. People turned to look around the room, searching for me, wondering if I was there. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I took out a notebook and wrote down everything my father said, word for word. The man at the podium was a heartbroken father. The girl in the back row was the problem. Nobody asked me if I wanted to speak. The meeting moved on. I left through the side door, but I kept the notes. Every calculated word, every rehearsed pause, every tear my mother produced on cue. The lawsuit was filed the next morning. Warren Lindgren was served on a Monday at 8:22 a.m. The process server walked up the driveway while my father was getting the newspaper. Mrs. Aldrich was walking her dog 2 houses down. She watched the whole thing. The envelope, Warren's face, the way he stood frozen on the driveway reading the first page. Judith was served separately, 45 minutes later, at the Crestwood grocery. She was in the produce section. 3 women from her church group were in the store at the time. By noon, half of Crestwood had heard. By dinner, the other half. Warren called my phone 11 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. Margaret had advised me, all communication goes through counsel now. At 6:33 p.m., a text came through. You're going to regret this. I'm your father. Margaret logged it. Exhibit 52. The next day, Judith started her campaign. She called 6 people in a single afternoon. Through tears, always tears, she told each one the same thing. My daughter is suing me because I loved her too much. But something had shifted. The lawsuit was filed in county court. Court records in Minnesota are public, and people in small towns read court records the way they read the church bulletin, thoroughly. By the end of the week, someone at the diner had pulled up the complaint online. The summary was right there in black and white. 41 documented phone calls, fabricated police reports, impersonation of a social worker, 2.5 years of systematic interference. For the first time, someone asked Judith a question she hadn't prepared for. It was Linda Gustafson, her co-chair on the women's ministry. They ran into each other at the post office. Linda, is it true you called her employers? Judith didn't answer. She got in her car and drove home. Warren signed up to speak at the next town council meeting. Of course he did. The podium worked once, he thought it would work again. This time, the room was packed. 50 people, maybe more. Folding chairs pulled from storage, people standing along the back wall. This wasn't about stoplights anymore. I sat in the 3rd row. Not the back, the 3rd row. Margaret sat beside me, legal pad on her lap, pen in hand. Her face gave away nothing. Warren took the podium at 7:12 p.m. Most of you know me, he said. I've lived in Crestwood my whole life. I served as town clerk for 18 years. I coached youth baseball. I volunteered at the fish fry every summer. He gripped the sides of the podium. And now, my own daughter is trying to destroy this family with a frivolous lawsuit. She's been influenced by outsiders, lawyers, people who don't understand how families work. He looked directly at me. I'm asking this community to stand with me. The room was silent. Then Margaret stood up. My name is Margaret Sahlberg. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of Minnesota, and I represent Tessa Lindgren. She spoke calmly. No drama, no raised voice. A lawsuit has been filed in county court. The complaint and its supporting evidence are part of the public record. I'd encourage anyone here who's curious to read the documents rather than relying on one person's version of events. She sat down. The room was quiet for 6 full seconds. I counted. Then the council chair cleared his throat and moved to the next agenda item. Warren stood at the podium a moment longer. His hands were still gripping the edges. Then he sat down. He didn't look at me again. The truth doesn't need a podium. It just needs to be accessible. And for the first time in 2.5 years, people were finally reading. The court granted the civil protection order 9 days later. 500 feet. No direct contact. No contact through third parties. No phone calls, texts, letters, emails, or messages relayed through neighbors, friends, or anyone else. Warren violated it within the first week. He borrowed Dale Erickson's phone, a neighbor who didn't know any better, and texted me at 9:47 p.m. "This isn't over, Tessa." Margaret documented it, filed it with the court. Warren received an official warning from the judge. One more violation, and he'd faced contempt charges. The defamation case moved forward. Margaret submitted Diane's evidence package, the recordings, the call logs, the fabricated documents, the metadata linking the anonymous emails to the Lindgren household. 41 calls, 7 forged police reports, 2.5 years of systematic destruction. Warren hired a lawyer, a low-cost attorney from 2 counties over who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. After reviewing the evidence, he called Margaret and recommended settlement. Warren refused. "I'm not settling with my own daughter." His attorney withdrew from the case the following week. Warren didn't hire a replacement. He represented himself for exactly one filing, a handwritten response that read, "This is a family matter, and the court has no jurisdiction over a father's right to protect his child." The judge disagreed. When Warren failed to appear for the hearing, Margaret moved for a default judgment. The court granted it. Defamation per se, tortious interference with employment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Total damages? $94,000. Warren didn't pay. Margaret filed a lien on the house. Meanwhile, the court records kept doing their work. Glenn, the hardware store manager in Millbrook, who'd rejected my first application, he called Margaret's office voluntarily. He was willing to testify. He still had his notes about the phone call. Kim from the coffee shop in Briarwood came forward too. She'd kept the email with the fake police report saved in her inbox. She remembered opening it. She remembered believing it. Bev from the diner in Hermantown sent a letter. She wrote that she'd felt sick about it ever since. She wished she'd trusted her gut instead of a stranger's phone call. I didn't contact any of them. I didn't post anything online. I didn't go door to door telling my side. I didn't have to. The evidence existed. The court records were public, and the people of Crestwood, for all their flaws, could read. The town didn't turn on Warren because I asked them to. They turned because the math stopped adding up. Judith was the first to feel it. The Thursday morning Bible study, a group of 9 women who'd been meeting at each other's houses for 12 years, sent her a message through the group organizer. "We think it's best if you take a break for now, Judith, just until things settle down." Things weren't going to settle down. Warren went to the coffee shop on Main Street, his booth, his morning routine for 20 years. The booth was empty, but nobody sat with him. The waitress refilled his coffee without making eye contact. Dale Erickson, the neighbor whose phone he'd borrowed, stopped by the house. "Warren, I've known you 15 years. Did you really fake a police report?" Warren closed the door in his face. The house sold 3 months later. Warren had no choice. The lien meant the judgment had to be satisfied before the property could transfer. After the lien, the realtor fees, and the back taxes he'd been ignoring, he walked away with just enough to rent. He and Judith moved to a duplex outside of Carlton, 25 minutes from Crestwood, close enough to still shop at the same stores, but far enough that they stopped running into people who used to wave. Warren never admitted he was wrong. Not once. He told his new neighbors the same story he told the town council. "My daughter was brainwashed by a lawyer." He'll probably tell that story until the day he dies. Some people would rather lose everything than admit they were the villain. But Judith did something I didn't expect. Diane told me about it months later. during one of our occasional phone calls. She still kept loose tabs on Crestwood. Old habits. "Your mother started seeing a therapist," she said. "On her own, without your father knowing." I didn't respond right away. She said to the therapist, during their third session, she said, "I think I did something terrible." Diane paused. She said, "Your mother started seeing a therapist," she said, "on her own, without your father knowing." I didn't respond right away. She said to the therapist, during their third session, she said, "I think I did something terrible." I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. I'm not ready to forgive her. I may never be. But I can hold two things at once. The woman who phoned 41 employers and lied about her daughter, and the woman who finally sat in a chair and said the truth out loud. People are complicated. Even the ones who hurt you worst. But complicated doesn't mean you owe them access to your life. Healing doesn't require reconciliation. Sometimes it just requires distance. 3 months after the judgment, a letter arrived at the shelter. Gloria forwarded it to my new address. Judith had sent it to my old one, a technical gray area in the protection order, but a violation of its spirit. I opened it at my kitchen table. My kitchen table. In my apartment, with my name on the lease. Dear Tessa, I'm your mother. I'll always be your mother. Dad says he's sorry. Come have Christmas dinner. We can put this behind us. I read it twice. Dad says he's sorry. Not Dad is sorry. Says. Like she was relaying a weather report. We can put this behind us. Not I was wrong. Not I shouldn't have phoned your employers 41 times. Not I forged documents to keep you unemployable. Just, we can put this behind us. Like it was a disagreement on the thermostat. I sat with that letter for an hour. I made coffee. I fed my cat, a tabby I'd adopted from the Duluth shelter and named Helena, because of course I did. Then I wrote back, through Margaret as the protection order required, "Mom, I wish you well, but love does not include sabotaging your child's ability to survive. You phoned my employers, you impersonated a social worker, you tried to get me removed from the only place I had to sleep. Please respect the court order. Do not contact me again. Tessa." I sealed the envelope, stamped it, drove to the post office in Duluth, not the one in Crestwood, not the one where anyone would see me and report back. Then I went home. My home. I cooked dinner for one, pasta, garlic bread, a glass of water. Helena sat on the counter and watched me eat. It was the best meal I'd ever had. I'm not telling you this story so you'll hate my parents. I'm telling you because somewhere right now, someone is lying in a bed they don't own, staring at a ceiling they can't paint, wondering if wanting a life of their own makes them a bad daughter, a bad son, ungrateful, selfish. It doesn't. Wanting to work is not betrayal. Wanting independence is not disrespect. And walking away from people who are actively destroying your life is not cruelty. It's survival. My great-aunt Helena couldn't save herself in time. She spent 26 years married to a man who controlled everything, where she went, who she talked to, what she was allowed to want. By the time she got free, she was 62 years old with nothing but a sold farmhouse and a plan. But she saved me. She planned it 8 years in advance. She hired a private investigator, she set up a trust, she wrote a letter and sealed it in a satchel and hoped I'd never need to open it. That's what real love looks like, not control dressed up as concern, not sabotage disguised as protection. Love makes a plan for your freedom, even when it costs everything. I'm 26 now. I work as an administrative assistant at Margaret's law office in Duluth. I'm saving for community college. I have a one-bedroom apartment with a window that overlooks a park. I have a used car with 127,000 miles on it. I have a cat named Helena that sheds on everything I own. And I don't talk to my parents. I haven't closed the door forever, but the key is mine now. They don't get to decide when it opens. Helena wrote in her letter, "Use it for freedom." I did. That's my story. If you made it this far, thank you. Not everyone has a great aunt who plans 8 years ahead, but everyone deserves to know that wanting independence is not betrayal. If this story reminded you of someone you know, send it to them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is enough. Hit like if this resonated, subscribe if you want more stories like this, and let me ask you something before you go. Have you ever had to choose between peace in your family and peace in yourself? I'd love to hear your answer in the comments.